Hi everyone, welcome. We're going to start in just a minute or two. If you're just joining us, drop in the chat where you're here from. Thanks for taking some time today to join us. This webinar today is about principals in summer school. It's sort of a mashup of a couple of topics that are interconnected but also really unique. So we'll let you know everything our generous presenter knows about setting up summer school and what it's like to be a principal this summer and going forward into next year. My name is Kristen Kohler. I am the U.S. Director of Education at Scanning Pens. Scanning Pens is your host for today's webinar, and there are some resources available to you at the end of the webinar. They're available at this bit.ly. It's bit.ly/Principal Summer School. If you're familiar with bit.lys, you know that they're case sensitive, so please follow the capitalization there. And then if you take a look at the bottom of this slide, you can also find us on social media. So make sure and find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, and follow us there just to keep up to date on what we're doing. My guest today is a friend and former colleague from Northern California. Heather is the Director of Educational Options for Pleasanton Unified School District. This is a mid-sized school district in a suburb of the San Francisco Bay Area, and she wears many hats in that district. She is the Director of Summer School, Extended Day Programs, and a principal at a continuation high school. So I'm going to let her tell us more about that in a minute. Heather's also the recipient of the 2017 AXA Region 6 Administrator of the Year Award. So welcome, Heather. Hi.
Hello. So good to see you, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you for being here. I know it's a busy time of year for principals, and so the fact that you're willing to join us just makes my day. I want to start with the basic, obvious question. I know personally that you wear many hats in the district, but please tell our attendees about your many roles in the district, but in particular your principal role and your summer school coordinator position.
Sure. Yeah. So I feel like it's hard to describe the roles without telling the whole story. I've been in the district since 2001. Was a science teacher, chemistry and biology primarily, at one of our two comprehensive high schools for many, many years. About 6 years ago, moved into the curriculum department. And my role then was extended day academic intervention and summer school, and it's just sort of expanded to include a bunch of things. In the former role, one of the projects that I started assisting with in terms of the curricular side was our home and hospital instruction and independent study, and that has morphed into educational options. So for us, educational options is a real need. And then, of course, with the pandemic, it became an amplified need. So it was something that we were working on beforehand. So this year, during the pandemic, moved from the curriculum department to the student support services division, where our ed options are housed. And so my role includes being the site principal of a continuation school. We actually house a few different programs here, one being our adult transition program. This is for students who are 18 to 22 who have moved out of a moderate to severe special education program at one of our comprehensives. They're in California. They're entitled to 4 additional school years for learning about life skills. And we also have for our SELPA, which is I actually never remember what it is. It's like special education, limited, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. Basically, it's a bunch of districts that work together to provide special education services for students for programs that would be smaller. So for our SELPA, which includes our district and then 3 surrounding districts, we house the counseling enriched program for our students who are credit deficient. So these are students who need a built-in therapist in their classroom on a daily basis, and they need the academic support. And then the last little bucket of kiddos that we serve here are students from our comprehensive schools who've chosen to come here because they are credit deficient. And we're small, but we're mighty. I love our kids. They're adorable. And we have the very, very best staff. So it's great. I love being on a campus. Sometimes it's hard doing both. Okay, it's always hard, but yeah. I wouldn't trade it. Like I like working with people and kids. So yeah.
Nice. I'm happy that you have this high school experience now, because I think credit recovery is such a tricky topic for everyone, and we have a question about that coming up later on. For our attendees, if you have questions for Heather, drop them in the chat as we talk, and then we'll circle back to them, or we'll stop and address them in the moment. So feel free to put your questions in the chat. So you wear a lot of hats and you do a lot of jobs, and you like people, which is a good thing. And in fact, you're sitting in your office now on a live campus. So at any moment now, you could be pulled away from the webinar.
Absolutely.
So fingers crossed it doesn't happen. Tell us about your summer school setup. It has evolved over the years, and obviously there's elementary, middle, and high, but in the way that you established the summer school, what's that like, and then what kind of outcomes have you seen with that model over the years?
Yeah, so about 6 years ago, when I took over the planning and implementation of summer school, I definitely had like my teacher's lens, and actually I've maintained that in terms of the planning and implementation. You know, as a teacher, I didn't really understand what summer school was. I knew kids went there, but I was living my best summer life during summer, so I didn't really think too much about it. When I was able to take over the program, I think I was the first person in a while who had overseen summer school, who really had that curricular focus, and who was very, very fresh from the classroom. I literally went from the classroom to doing this. So identified a lot of needs sort of early on, and started reaching out to the network, including people like Kristen, to help with areas that I didn't have as much knowledge of, elementary school in particular. And the way that we have it set up this year is a little different due to COVID, but last year it was completely virtual, completely online. The prior years, basically what it is and has been is, 4 weeks, anywhere from 20 to 25 days, about 4 hours per day. And we house our summer school programs at our comprehensive school sites. So we typically have our elementary program at one of our elementary schools, and then we have our secondary program, 6 through 12, housed at one of our high schools. We do keep the middle schoolers and high schoolers separated as much as we can. But we do run them in our current schools. We don't quite have enough kids to run one at each school, so we do have to consolidate. It's evolved over the years in terms of really like defining the job for the teachers. That was one thing in the beginning that was really kind of undefined. It was just, okay, we hire you and you're teaching first grade and you should be teaching first grade. And so now we incorporate as much data as we possibly can to help our teachers understand sort of like we have this concentrated time with the kiddos. What are the essential skills and standards that we should be working on with these students? For us, we've really shifted from summer school. We used to actually, weirdly, when I took over the program, like if a student was in first grade and they were recommended to summer school, they were actually placed in second grade in summer school. I think that that's a pretty common practice, but like it's one that I've never understood, so I got rid of it. For me, summer school, so I'm like, if I can't catch on, we're not doing this. For me, summer school is a continuation of the current school year. Like we're sending you there because we're saying like, hey, you didn't quite get enough this year. Let's continue to work on those skills. I think the previous thinking was like, let's get them ready for second grade, which isn't entirely wrong. I just couldn't ever really connect with it because, I don't know. I just couldn't. No real reason. So we are now, it's a continuation of like whatever grade you're in. So for example, first grade, and we really try to make it clear for our staff that we're working on, again, those skills and standards that the students didn't quite master during the school year. 20 days is not enough. So it's not, the expectation that, after 180 days of learning, all deficiencies will be remediated in 20 days. But it is our goal to keep students moving forward and help them be a little bit more prepared for the next grade level. Most of our students are not recommended for retention. And what we see is patterns, historical patterns of the same students being in summer school year after year.
Right.
Our standards are incredibly high here.
Right. So I hear you saying that you're using data to select kids for summer school, that the primary goal of summer school is to sustain learning and prevent learning loss, not necessarily to close gaps, and that you recommend that students exiting that grade stay with that content for summer school and not move on to the next grade's content for summer school, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Good, good. Okay. So I think that you are measuring summer school outcomes as well. And, not everyone loves data the way you and I do, but you do look for trends in the outcomes of your summer school data.
We do. It's been tricky here. We still don't have the best data systems. We're still kind of working on that. We use a variety of data systems. So we use something called Q, which is our student information system that really has grades. We have the other one. I want to call it Escape. That's not what it is. Illuminate. Yes, sorry, thank you. Illuminate, which houses a lot of the data for elementary school. And then we have different digital supports that we've used over the years, but they do seem to keep changing. We're in the middle of, we kind of still are in the middle of like these adoptions, K through 12, where every year we'll get a couple of new content areas. And then we have, in the new curriculum adoptions, there'll be new ways to gather and keep data for students. But we do measure at the beginning and at the end of summer school, and we try to provide some feedback for our for not only for our families and our students, but to the receiving teachers in the fall. Here's what the student did, and here's what we saw, and here's where we need you to sort of pick up that baton and keep going.
Nice, nice. I appreciate that part. I think often we tend to disregard outcomes from summer school and not share that information with next year's teacher so that they have even more information on what that student had during the summer and what kind of supports and what kind of data results from that. So that's a cool feature. Data's the thing, right? So this year, how did you go about collecting data and deciding who to invite to summer school? Because you can't see everyone. So how do you make those investments?
This year was rough. So again, I sort of alluded to our sort of not fantastic data collection systems, but I'll use any piece of data that I can gather to make a decision about a kiddo. So gathered as much data as we could. We did start using a couple of years ago NWEA's measures of academic progress, or the MAP test. And in the previous school years, it's kind of been hit or miss who took it. This year, actually, weirdly, even with remote, it's been better. And that's partially because the students can take it at home. And so we did have MAP data. We have all of the data for elementary school, like the dibbles and all the things that I don't understand that well, but sort of. But I know how to tell what a range is and how kids are doing. So we used all of that data. We compile lists of our preliminary recommendations, and we push those out to the school sites. Now, I will acknowledge that that is typically overwhelming for the majority of our staff. Because they get, I kind of made this little algorithm based off of the different data points that we could get, and we sort of rank the students like based on these data points and this data that we've collected, these are the students that we're recommending for summer school. And it's a first pass. It really is. It's, who knows, and I'm talking really about elementary right now. Secondary, I can talk about after, but for elementary, who knows who needs summer school the best? Those teachers. They're in those classrooms with them. And, I'm a secondary teacher, but I know a little bit about elementary, and I know they grow quickly. So sometimes when I pull data, by the time I check in with the teachers, like, I don't know, a month later, they're like, oh, no, they got that now. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Little ones can make really good progress with targeted intervention really, really quickly in a way I typically don't see with my big kids. So we push out this list to the staff, and then we say, have at it. Like, I'd like you to add kids that I missed, and I'd like you to remove kids for whom summer school is no longer something that you would recommend. And so they that, and then we take all of that data and we push out the invitations. And it's still not perfect. I mean, this morning I was adding students who teachers like changed their mind on, like they were on the border and now they've declined, and so they want them to come to summer school. And that's one thing that I really try to do, as the sort of leader of summer school. And again, I come at it from that teacher's lens. So while, 2 weeks before summer school starts, it's a little hard for us to keep adding students, I always say, absolutely, thank you. Let me an invitation to this family if we have space. If we don't have space, I do have to be honest about that. But as long as I'm happy to bring in any student who needs it, because again, if teachers decided they need it, they need it.
Right. I hear you saying that you pull from multiple data sources, so we're not just using one source of data. Your teachers probably put their classroom and report card data also in Illuminate, so you have multiple sources of data. Then we have a rubric or a methodology for ranking that data to decide which ones are the drivers of decision making. And then I hear you saying that that teacher in the classroom, especially at the elementary level, gets a lot of input because they really have the most contact with their students. And then middle and high school, less so because of the schedule, but they still probably know those students best and can make those recommendations.
Yeah, middle and high school, it's pretty straightforward. It's just by grades. We actually don't use any additional data yet for middle and high school. We're getting there. We're a high achieving district, so we're super grades dependent. And I think we all know grades are something to be said there about grades, but that seems to work pretty well for us. I will say that I do pull a list of low GPAs, and I just do my own sort of analysis of those low GPAs. And if I don't see the students recommended because maybe they're not exactly failing, but they have low GPAs, then I'll reach out and, offer some remediation to those students, particularly in middle school. I really like to look at grades 5 and grades 8, because those are those pivotal times where you see kids moving out of grade 5 into grade 6. And then if we don't really support them through that little bump, then they can really suffer academically later. And grade 8 is also that sort of pivotal time. So I try to grab as many of those students as possible, even if they're not necessarily picked up by their grades. They just have like persistent low-ish grades, because those students, we've seen when they do go to that next grade level, it's just over. So we really try to grab them up.
I like that. I like the focus on those transitional grades because those students can or tend to fall through the cracks as they're transitioning through. And for those upper grades, I like the combination of their letter grade and then taking a second pass looking at their GPA just to make sure, so that there are multiple data points. And I really appreciate your district's emphasis on your role in terms of being that safety net to look again with fresh eyes at the data to see who else might be a good candidate for summer school. I took a look at a research article from ERIC, which is the research arm connected to the National Department of Education. They did a meta-analysis of 25 studies of summer school programs since the year 2000, and they collected some of the positive effects for summer school. Not surprisingly, class size was one of them, but I was interested to learn that there were some other aspects that need to be combined with class size. For the attendees, the articles that will be referenced today are in a resource document for you, so stay tuned to the end. We have those in a bit.ly for you, and you can read those articles or share them with your colleagues if you want to. So this probably comes as no surprise to you, Heather, but in addition to small class sizes, and by small, they were talking about fewer than 20, an ideal range was around 13, which I don't think is sustainable for most school districts, but good information to know. The instruction has to align with student needs, so probably students struggling with reading and math, using qualified teachers, including teachers that are connected to the students, so from the same school or from the same district that have that personal connection, high quality instruction, of course. And then interestingly, they found a high degree of success in schools that created a culture for staff and students and families for that summer school experience, whether that was themes or special events on Fridays or whatever. Having that culture of activities was important. Also maximizing participation, so incentive programs for reading at home or doing activities at school, and incentive programs for attendance, which I'm sure you could also talk about. And then sufficient duration, and I heard you talk about this earlier, 70 hours overall, which a minimum of 4 hours a day over enough weeks to include 70 hours of instruction, which also is, I think, difficult in my experience with summer school to hit. So did you talk about what elementary schools do to, incentivize participation and attendance at your summer schools?
Sure. I do have to say, when I was reading this last week after you sent it, I was like, it was cool to see all of these things, because these are, and because you've known me long enough, these are things we've tried to implement in summer school over the duration of time that I've been involved, and to sort of see it, validated in is awesome. So yeah, we actually use, we're a PBIS district, and so we had a PBIS grant for a number of years, and so in, I think, the second summer school I ran, we just kind of capitalized on what we had already available for PBIS. So one of the things I was able to do is hire, we're super lucky here to have a number of school social workers, and they actually help at our different school sites with PBIS. So I was lucky to be able to talk to our county and ask, can we, during the summer, hire some of these folks that work with our more high needs kids during the school year, right? So to have that sort of year-round support. And so we have a school social worker, and we have a K through 12 counselor during summer. Summer school usually serves around 1,200 to 1,300 students here in Pleasanton. And again, they're really, really are high needs kids usually. So having PBIS has been wonderful. The kids really do like it. We, I think, probably like everyone, struggle a little bit in high school because kids are not as amenable to the reward system. Struggled as a district in implementing it in high school, but K through 8, it's awesome, and really, like, they'll do anything for a popsicle. They're, and it just feels good to reward them for just participating, being in summer school. We're really cognizant about our rewards as well. We don't want, we don't want to necessarily tie it to grades. We want them to be participating, and we want them to sort of follow like the PBIS matrix in terms of participation and behavior, and how we behave at summer school. But it's been really successful over the past number of years that we've had it. In fact, there were a couple of changes that I made, like, I want to say like 3 years ago, to middle school. If any of you are middle school people out there, bless you, because middle schoolers are adorable, but they can be very challenging at that stage of development. And I didn't have a lot of experience with them. Thankfully, our administrators do. I don't serve as the lead administrator or the on-site administrator necessarily in summer school, but we made like huge adjustments to middle school and went from pretty much constant behavior challenges in summer school to like Zero. We changed the structure. It changed the outcome. It was amazing. It was all PBIS oriented and really looking at student needs and trying to, again, kind of work with the middle schoolers instead of against their nature, and just stop providing them with opportunities to do some of the things the behaviors that we were seeing. So it was cool. Good outcome.
Nice. For attendees who aren't familiar, PBIS is Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports. PBIS lives under the larger umbrella of MTSS, which is Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. And under that umbrella, PBIS lives next to RTI, which is Response to Intervention. So you have academic interventions next to behavioral interventions, all under the umbrella of MTSS. So for those of you who are fringe educators, you now know all of the major acronyms that there are, and we like to make acronyms out of things in education, so that's the PBIS piece. Yeah, it's nice to know that you were able to connect with middle schoolers in that way, because they are a tricky audience to capture.
They're so cute. They really are adorable and not my jam.
Yeah, elementary school teachers feel the same.
Right. Like, thankful someone out there really likes me. They're really cute. And it took me a minute to sort of understand their behavior. But the cool thing about PBIS, just like MTSS, it's about teaching, right? Behavior is just about teaching and modeling for students. It's not about being punitive. It's not about punishment. Someone who I really respect that I work with closely, just said behavior is a way of communication, and they're just communicating their needs. And so if we, if we hear that communication because they're middle schoolers and it's the only way they know how to communicate, and we provide them with support so that they can be their best selves instead of their maybe not so best selves, everybody benefits, and they eventually grow out of being a middle schooler. Most of them. So it's just getting them through that. Right.
So I can only imagine how your teachers have felt this year. Like most of us, it's been a crazy, turbulent, unsteady year. Tell us about your process for recruiting teachers. I can't imagine you didn't encounter some resistance. So what did you do to get some teachers to sign up for summer school?
Yeah. So it's been rough. I mean, particularly here in California, right? We have COVID, but I think everybody kind of forgot also at the beginning of the year, we had wildfires. So it was like so many disasters, one on top of another. And we did spend a lot of time just shuttered in our homes. Again, not just for COVID, but because there was like at least a month or 6 weeks where we couldn't even leave the house because it was like literally like we couldn't breathe outside. So our teachers are tired. They're so tired. We're all exhausted. And yet we have this point in time where our kids need us more than ever. And we need a break more than ever. Knowing that was going to happen, started a little bit ago with having conversations with our cabinet around increasing pay for our teachers. You mentioned the benefit of having teachers from our district. That's been a big push of mine over the time that I've been working in summer school, and I will say that it has been great. Like we went from like the first year I did summer school to having the majority of our teachers from outside of the district, to last year I think we had one teacher from outside the district, and this year I think we're trending on maybe 2 or 3. So we really, had some conversations about, and we started prior to kind of knowing about state and federal money, but just having those conversations about how if we're going to extend summer school by a couple of weeks, because we did do that this year, we're going to need to perhaps increase pay. We had to increase pay here as a district for our substitutes, and so really working towards that. And so that's what we were able to do. Nice. So we did the pay for this year. Of course, I have huge concerns about that moving forward. No one's going to want to work for the, regular ever again. But I think everybody is understanding that it is, we are in a pandemic. we're also trying really hard to provide our teachers with everything they need to do a good job in summer school. When I hire our principals, I have two principals at each level. Elementary and middle and high has a principal and a vice principal. We really talk about customer service for the staff as well as for the families and the kids. And how do we make it so that, it's tough because you got to get up and you got to be here every day because we are in person also, but that it is also fun. And so we mentioned PBIS earlier. For the kiddos, we also do, it's not called PBIS, but we do appreciations for our staff, and our social worker arranges all of that with local businesses to make sure that the staff is appreciated. We have raffles and drawings and things like that. So just really trying to support everyone. We're all so very tired, but our kids need us. And so,
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I hadn't thought of that. So I did do a little digging and research and articles to find out what other districts were doing. And, not surprisingly, money talks, but I really appreciate that you've partnered, with the community to do some teacher appreciation type things. That would be a really nice incentive to share with other districts so that they could partner locally and get those things going too. Most of what I found was around increased pay as well, but I'm glad that you're able to tap into the local teachers.
Yeah. And again, it's about, for me, it's about quality for our students, right? Like, I can pay you more and maybe you'll sign up because you want the pay, but is that that you're doing a great job with the most vulnerable of kids who've been out of school for a year? I don't know. And I want the best for our students. So it really is creating that team. That's about the culture piece that you were talking about earlier, creating a culture. We support each other. We have high expectations for each other and for the kids.
Right. So I know curriculum is always a number one question, and it's tied closely to money. So in terms of what you're teaching during summer school, are you using any of the federal or state funding that's been made available? And then what are you doing next year with some of that funding?
Yeah, so for summer school, this was exciting. We've traditionally, summer school is not an ADA generating program in California. I don't know how it works across the country, but we're actually not paid to provide summer school. And so we are mandated by Ed to provide some sort of summer school, but there's no parameters on it. And just my nature is I want all children who need it to have it. And so it tends to get expensive, and I have to have those conversations with, the people who control the money. And so we've not really ever had a large amount of money for curriculum, particularly targeted for summer school. We've always kind of had to patch things together. We've used some digital supports in the past. And again, we're continuing those adoptions. Those adoptions are happening. So we've tried to, a lot of your new curriculum come with intervention or summer school stuff now. That's just how it's made. But we were able this year to, so we have a pretty decent number of English learners here in Pleasanton. And so that's actually another bucket of kiddos that we were able to invite to summer school. So they might not necessarily academically be behind, but they're super newcomers to learning English. So we were able to get some curriculum for them. Our coordinator of language acquisition is actually working on securing that. And then our director of elementary is working on securing some specific math intervention and some specific ELA intervention, sort of separate from what we use during the school year. So that's been cool. In secondary, again, because it's credit recovery, we are using sort of the same curriculum that we see during the school year. But we have a K-12 digital support that we're utilizing through a company called Edgenuity. And it's something called MyPath. And this is a digital curriculum that is connected to the results from the MAP assessments. And what MyPath does is it creates an individual learning path for each kiddo. And we're actually making that available to every student in K through 12 to do remotely if they would like.
Nice, nice. I hear you saying that sometimes, and principals who are attending today probably are already familiar with this, but it's your role to advocate for more money, more resources where they're needed in order to support summer school or other programs that you manage.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Oh, come on. We know what I do. I beg.
Yeah.
I'm a beggar. I do provide data too. It's really helpful. And, when you're having these conversations, I'm glad I don't have to make those final decisions around money. Because it's stressful, especially when there's not enough. What's cool is this year there is enough. It's kind of the first time in education that it's like, okay, you have all the money you need to do all the things, yet all of your personnel is too exhausted to work. Mm-hmm. So it's like this weird thing, but I'm also really reasonable and I can cut back where I need to cut back. I don't ever recommend, sort of advocating for one part of a system at the detriment of other parts of the system or at the whole of the system. So I think it's important for those of us in these roles to sort of know what the needs and demands are in other spaces in our district so that we can make decisions that are reasonable and that, don't take a disproportionate amount of resources when those are not available.
Right. Okay, so credit recovery is a great topic. Tell us what you have done this year for credit recovery and what you're going to do in the summer.
Yeah, so credit recovery, we actually had a spring remediation program. So I forgot what it was called, Spring Remediation Academy, I believe. And what we did is, like many high schools in the country, we saw an increase in the number of students that got D's or F's. In California, those D's or F's were actually changed to credit or no credit. So the D's and F's were gone, but for students who got no credit, they still would end up credit deficient. So our Spring Remediation Academy took sort of our most vulnerable kiddos. It was fairly small, 180, I think, students. And just for your sort of context, we have about 5,000 high school students between the three high schools. And we were able to offer an 8-week credit recovery session. The students met with their teachers 1 hour per day for 8 weeks, 1 hour per school day, for 4 days a week for 8 weeks. And then they had additional work to create, to complete outside of that. Because we were last year, pre-pandemic, we were in the process of adopting this new curriculum through Edgenuity, and we had planned to only utilize it for a very small home and hospital program, but then the pandemic came and we were able to kind of push it out district-wide. And basically what it is it's a learning management system because we don't have one of our own yet. With content built in. And so what our teachers do is they create a blended class for the kiddos because we need some level of asynchronous access for students during this school year because attendance could not, in-person attendance could not be compulsory. So they utilized the learning management system. They utilized the adopted curriculum that we had and created these blended courses for the kids where there was some synchronous expectations and then some asynchronous learning. The cool part about those learning management systems is you really can differentiate. You really can tailor it for each student. And that's been an advantage for us in summer school as well. Traditionally, summer school for high school, students can only take 2 classes in summer school. And that makes, for high school folks on the call, like master scheduling, and that makes a really tiny little master schedule. So what that means is that it was really hard to get kids to remediate the exact semester that they missed. So by utilizing these learning management systems, it provided the teachers with the tools they needed to give, if they had 25 kids in their class, maybe some of those kids were first semester of chemistry and half of the kids were second semester of chemistry, you could actually feasibly and reasonably do that because you could utilize the learning management system to help the kiddos track their own learning. And then your in-person time could be spent providing them with, you know, opportunities and tutoring and lab experiences, things like.
Nice, nice. That's really comprehensive. Well done. You mentioned differentiation, and that was kind of my next question. I was curious over summer school, you know, you get a spectrum of students. So between the English learners, 504 plans, special education students, you know, what tools do you have in place? How are you differentiating and accommodating all those diverse learners?
Yeah, so again, one of the we've had a variety of different ways that we've tried to do this. In pre-pandemic, we've been able to utilize a rotation model with our elementary students. We're not going to be able to do that this year because our little ones can't be vaccinated. So we still have to be really careful with movement and tracking of students. But we were able to create a model in our elementary school where we would create small groups for students and utilizing classes that were more like enrichment based, so arts and music, computer labs, move students around on a daily basis so that they could be in smaller groups and target their specific needs when it came to reading or math, etc. Obviously, again, COVID put a stop to everything last year. We were able to get our individual learning plans established with Edgenuity. And so the cool part about that is even if the student doesn't actually use it, the connection and the creation of the ILP provides the teacher with a ton of information. So the teacher can then use that information to really sort of plan out what it is that the student needs. Most of our digital supports do provide for differentiation for the kiddos. So even if we can't create small rotation groups, we can have teachers have the information they need to keep an eye on the kids. The Edgenuity platform at secondary for 6 through 12 is pretty fantastic in that the learning management system itself provides a multitude of ways to provide accommodations and modifications for students. For example, if a student you know, needs, sometimes you'll see on an IEP or a 504 that the student should have access to a recorded lecture. Well, that's all just part of the learning management system. If a student needs something written to them, the learning management system can do that. If a student needs important text to be highlighted, you can set the learning management system to do that. So we're really finding that, you know, this digital textbook, because that's really all these things are, is highly adaptable and really helpful for our students who have, you know, accommodations and modifications on their 504s that require things, you know, like the things I just described. It also allows us to do retesting in a way that is manageable for members.
Nice. That's a ton of differentiation. And, you know, at Scanning Pens, we advocate for a toolbox of accommodation and tools to support kids. So it's nice to know that those different digital systems and different digital platforms provide that. In a year where kids have been locked into screens, it's good to know that tools like text-to-speech can support their acquisition of content within the textbook. So all of that information really helps you guys differentiate, which is tremendous. Let me ask you about social emotional learning this year. Are you going to be able to weave that into summer school? And if not, I know you mentioned you have counselors on campus. So are their roles changing this year? Are they playing a bigger part?
So we've always done that with the counselors. That's been sort of, you know, since we were able to, you know, get them on our team for summer school. We also are really lucky to have some district parent liaisons. And so we have 8 of them, and they speak a multitude of languages between them. And so between the counselors, the parent liaisons, and the school social worker, they do provide opportunities for our staff to learn more about SEL and how to incorporate SEL into the classroom. We have before summer school starts, we have and we'll do this digitally this year, but we sort of have like a back to school night. So it's like a back to summer school night where our families are invited to a webinar. And, again, we sort of talk about how to support students, not only with their academics, but also their social emotional needs. And we connect parents to resources that they might have. We know that if a student isn't emotionally healthy, then they cannot learn. And so we know that this is tough times for everyone. So this team, while they've been doing this kind of all along, I think it's going to be more profound this year in terms of the level of support that they're going to need to provide. So our counselor, our counselor and our social worker on part of our work day, which happens on the Friday before summer school starts, they do a session with all of our teachers to talk about how to support kids through SEL and then utilize PBIS to support the social emotional learning and sort of provide that wraparound and incentive for kiddos.
Nice. For attendees, some of the information that Heather's telling us about is in the articles that I've captured for you. There will be a bit.ly at the end and a document for those resources. So if a lot of this is difficult to absorb this way, you can read more about it at the end. So, principals wear so many hats, and this icon of sort of juggling the hats really made me think of you, just because of all the different responsibilities that district and site administrators have. It's been such a unique year that I'm wondering if you have a key learning that you're going to carry with you into next year. And I wonder if you have a favorite resource as a site leader, as a district leader, that you would like to tell people about.
Sure. This is a question. Key learning. I don't know. Like I can say that one thing I've gotten better at, and I don't know if it was just out of need, is better at sort of delegating and just letting it be. I tend to not micromanage. I don't know if that's the right word. I tend to want to make sure everything is really good. So that can be a lot of work sometimes. And so I've learned to kind of let go a little bit, be very clear with my expectations, and then just kind of circle back. But I don't know if there's anything I've really learned this year. I mean, I've learned a ton, but okay, I've learned this year and I'm going to move forward with this. This has changed me other than it's all going to be okay. I know that, we as educators have this idea that oh my gosh, it's 7th grade. They missed 7th grade. How are they? They're going to be okay. We're going to get what we get and not throw a fit in the fall. And we're going to meet them where they're at and we're going to take them where they need to go. And it's all going to be okay. I'm trying to ban the notion of learning loss from my brain because I don't know if that's a thing. I'm not convinced that that's a thing. I don't think kids ever learn all at the same rate anyway. So I think,
Nice.
Biggest thing. I need to chill.
It's all going to be okay. We should put that on a t-shirt.
It really is. It's going to be okay. The kids are going to be okay.
Do you have a go-to resource, a favorite place that you go to when you're stuck and need to figure out how to process through something?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't had as much time to read this year as I would love to. I'm such a nerd. I love to read and look at research, but not a lot of time this school year. But Twitter, a couple of my favorite to follow. I like EdSource. EdSource is, it's that balance of you can read a quick article and then there's the more in-depth research pieces. And then another resource that I read voraciously is Learning for Justice. It used to be Teaching Tolerance. But when we're talking about remediation and summer school and any of our programs for at-risk students, there is always sort of a historical construct in terms of who we serve, and I don't ever want to lose sight of that. Learning for justice and again, formerly teaching tolerance helps me to sort of connect the dots and helps for me to train staff as well to work with students. So
love
those
the
are my
resource.
Yeah,
I think
really
that brings it all. That they have so many resources. And for those of you, I didn't know until recently also that Teaching Tolerance has sort of rebranded themselves as Learning for Justice. But if you're interested in broadening your knowledge base there, they have lesson plans and things to read and things to watch, and it's a great resource. So for the attendees, we are going to take questions for Heather. So if you're wondering anything in particular, she's available to answer your questions. And then we typically would show you a demonstration of our scanning pen. My document camera would not connect today, but I am going to show you a quick demonstration of how the scanning pen works as far as moving kids away from some of the digital-based text-to-speech. They've been interacting with screens so much. This is one way to support that. Let's see if I can narrate over this just a wee bit. If you're attending, let me know if you hear any echo. The scanning pen is a handheld or portable text-to-speech tool. And once text is scanned, it can be read out loud.
Without another word, Mr. Darcy left the...
I don't know if you could hear that part, but the student can play that text out loud or in their earbuds. You can set different language options as well, and even different dialects or voices within that language. You prefer British English. There are embedded dictionaries so students can learn new words or words they don't know.
Without preposition not having, free from.
So while they're reading, they can decode a word or know the meaning of a word without as much interruption to their comprehension. There are also a ton of menu settings for left-handed versus right-handed and many other features. The students can scan to a file or to a cursor on the page of a Word or Google Doc. And they can also voice record into the scanning pen, or a teacher could voice record instructions or exam questions or a myriad of things. So if you're not familiar, that is a quick look at our scanning pen. And we're super grateful that Heather. We have free trials for the scanning pen available at scanningpens.com. So you can go there and get a free trial if you're interested. The resources and articles for today's content are listed here. I pulled some of the research articles in addition to some of the articles about best practices for summer school and best practices for site leaders in general. So those are listed there as well. If you go to that bit.ly Principal Summer School, you will have access to live links to those. And I also downloaded a copy of today's slides in that bit.ly. So if you wanted to look at the slides more closely, you can see them there. I do not see any questions in the chat, Heather. So the $50 million question is that once summer school is over for you, what are you going to do besides sleep until noon every day?
Well, we are, there's no rest for the weary here. So here in Pleasanton, one of my educational options is that we are actually starting a virtual school for students. So it's sort of it's an expansion of our independent study program. As you can imagine, there's still going to be a need for some remote learning for students. And so that school opens in the fall. So I'll be opening that school.
Another hat for you to wear.
Yes. But nice. I am getting some support. We're gonna hire someone to help with the oversight of summer school. So I'll have a time here.
Nice. So for everyone who attended today, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us. This is recorded and you'll be able to share the recording with colleagues and friends or watch again later if you want to. My special heartfelt thanks to Heather. It's a busy time of year for all of us, and to have her take time out to talk with us today was especially meaningful for me as an old friend, but also just because I know there's so much in her brain that we could have spent a couple of hours getting out today. So that's it for us from Scanning Pens. Thank you again for attending, and have a great rest of your school year, everyone, and a wonderful summer, whether you're teaching summer school or taking a break or a vacation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.